All right, so we're coming down to aspects here in Module 5, and we'll talk a little bit about synthesis. There are still a few things that we're going to have to touch on in the following weeks before we really go into depth on synthesis, but at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a kind of walkthrough of what we're actually doing when we interpret the chart. So I'm going to have my slides up and I'm going to be looking down and looking at you. So just understand that's why I'm doing this, so I can see what you're seeing. So aspects are the angles. There's mathematical angles in a chart. Essentially, because we have this whole wheel, we can say that there are contacts between planets that are closer to exactly together, that are maybe 90 degrees apart, that are maybe 180 degrees apart, so on and so forth. But at the core of it, aspects are the angles that the planets, the contacts that they are making to one another, or another important point in the chart, like the ascendant, the midheaven, the IC, the descendant. You can also look at how they're contacting asteroids. So like, for example, we did not get into Chiron. I kind of thought I would touch on Chiron and I skipped it because I didn't want to go too in depth for a 101 class, but Chiron is pretty important. So just really quickly, I'm just going to say Chiron is our wounded healer. Where you see Chiron in the chart, you're going to see where somebody's wounding occurs, particularly in the aspects. It's going to show by the house. The plant or the sign it's under is going to a little bit have some bearing, but predominantly you're going to be looking at how Chiron is touching planets and with aspects, and also the house it's in. Okay, so the connected planets or other points of interest in the chart will modify a person's behavior. And here in the slide you can see a kind of a quick glimpse, a visual of what the aspects are. So a conjunction is when they are sitting next to one another. An opposition is when they are opposite in the chart, opposite sides of the chart. This one actually has the semi-sextile. We won't talk about that because it's a minor aspect. The sextile, the trine, let's see, do they have the square in here? They do have the square in here. Okay, so we'll be talking about the 5 major aspects, and we will talk about one minor aspect. But for what you need to understand is aspects are really where the chart comes alive. A lot of times people are like, well, I don't resonate with this part of my chart, or I don't resonate with this particular placement. Well, that's because we haven't gotten into how that planet is behaving based on what other planets are talking to it, what other conversations it's having. So the major aspects. So first of all, the conjunction. This is a blending of energy. So it is both harmonious and challenging. Some conjunctions are more on the harmonious side and some are more on the challenging side. But most of them, you're going to see both sides. The planets are sitting beside each other. They are merging their energy as one. So we can't look anymore at a conjunction like it is this planet and that planet. We are looking at them as a singular unit. This is something really important for you to understand, because if you have a conjunction between 2 planets, and that conjunction is also making an aspect, let's say a trine, to another planet in the chart, then we don't just simply say, this one planet is trine to this one, and then this planet is trine to this one. We look at that as a unit, and then we talk about the trine. So you're going to have to blend more when you have conjunctions. This can result in both positive and negative elements of the planets coming through in the native's life. The planet with the lesser degree will have a slight edge in controlling the energy of the planet. So for example, if you have Venus at 15 degrees and Mars is at 16 degrees in the same sign, that's a conjunction, but Venus has a little bit more control. So then we have the opposition, and that is literally they're opposite in the chart. This is a challenging aspect. Oftentimes you'll see this play out with relationships with other people. Not always, but that's a lot of times how they're going to manifest. So just keep that in mind, that that might be one loud area that it could come through. But they create this tension as the native tries to find the balance. So if we have the energy of the moon in the first house, for example, and that's a very kind of selfish energy, really. A moon in the first house. It doesn't mean the person's selfish. Obviously, we have to look at other things. But it's a very much like emotionally, I need me. I need my independence. I need to do what I want to do to feel secure. And then let's say we have Venus in opposition to the moon in the first house. We have Venus in opposition in the seventh house. Well, the seventh house is about our one-on-one relationships, our close ones, particularly like marriages and best friends, right? So if Venus is over there, we are going to find ourselves just like loving love. We're going to live and breathe for relationships. How are we going to balance those energies? Are we going to live and breathe for other people? Or are we going to go, no, I need my independence? So there is a push-pull, a tug of war that is going to exist in somebody's personality when they have that. Okay, so yeah, think of it like two very different people fighting to be heard at the same time. And I do have the symbol that you'll see on the aspect table, the aspect grid, under each one of these slides. So you see the one for opposition looks like a circle, and a line connecting them. Okay, and then we have the square. So the square is also a challenging aspect. It is going to be just more of an internal tension, an internal struggle, a personality problem. I hate to use the word problem, but it's going to show up as troublesome parts of the personality. If, you know, we're needy, if we're too blunt, if we're cold, if we have a hard time accepting love, all those kind of things are going to come out through the aspects. This is where we're finding this stuff in charts. So whereas the oppositions require balancing the energy of both planets, the squares require awareness and effort to overcome them. And then a square looks, the symbol for it looks like a square. Okay, and then we have the trine. A trine is 120 degrees apart. So this is going to happen when there's the planets are with the same element. So if you have, you know, I have a Scorpio sun, for example. So if I had any planets in Cancer or in Pisces, because those are also water signs, then I'm going to have a trine depending on the degree, but that would make a trine. So the planets involved in a trine will cooperate effortlessly with one another. They are just like having something lucky, easy flow of energy. It's just like, it's just so simple for those planets to operate together. It's an ease. The only issue with trines is people take them for granted. They don't have to work at it. So if you see somebody, for example, that has just tons of trines in their chart, don't think that this is just going to be the nicest, best person ever. They might be lazy as shit because they've had no struggle in their personality, in their life. I mean, rarely are you ever going to see a chart that's just all trines, but if you have somebody who has predominant trines, I don't necessarily look at that and go, oh, that's so great. A lot of times people get freaked out when they realize that the red lines in a chart are challenging aspects. They go, oh my God, look at all these red lines. I would rather see that. While there is a lot of struggle for that person, absolutely, that it's like the pressure on the lump of coal that makes a diamond. You know, people who have just had it handed to them, and this can be we can take this example and make it a small thing like one trine, or we can make it a big thing. But generally, if people have something handed to them, they take it for granted. They kind of assume everybody is that way. So an example for you from my own chart is the closest, we'll get to this, I'll make this make sense in a minute when I say closest, but the closest, the loudest aspect in my chart is a 0 degree, a perfect exact trine between Mars and Jupiter. I know very well how to use my energy and to use my Mars nature, okay, and not misplace it and not overdo it. It's just super simple for me. I also tend to forgive or get over things pretty easily too, because Jupiter is a forgiving kind of generous planet. So if you're talking about how I fight, right, I've got a Libra Mars, which is very diplomatic and fair, right? And then it's trine beautifully to Jupiter. But here's the thing. This is a lovely thing in my chart, but I don't realize that, hey, other people might not have such an easy time like getting their chores done, getting their work done, having a balanced approach to forgiveness, to letting things go. I'm not saying I always forgive, because I still have a Scorpio Stellium, but you get that. Okay, so sextiles. Sextiles are also harmonious. They're 60 degrees apart. The difference here is it's something that you have to work with to make it work. It's not just there like the trine. Again, I'll give you a personal example. In my chart, I have Venus sextile to Neptune. That's a very artistic, creative aspect. I had no idea. I would have sworn to you that I could not draw for shit until I was in my early 30s, and through a series of events, I started learning how to do portraiture, just graphite, pencil, and whatnot, doing portraits. And I'm really good at it. I caught on super fast. I was doing portraits that looked like I had been doing portraits all my life within just a few months. But I had no idea for the first 3 decades of my life, because I had never really tried. But as soon as I tried, yeah, the gift is there. So you have to work with it. It's an opportunity. You have to turn it on to make it work with the sextile. Okay, and then we're going to talk about one minor aspect. There are several minor aspects in astrology: the semi-square, the semi-sextile. We're not going to go into all of them, but one that astrologers kind of do consider this a major aspect is the inconjunction. It's also called the quincunx. Now you understand why we just say inconjunction, right? It's 150 degrees apart. It is challenging, but it's challenging in a way that the native has no idea it's even creating problems for them. I'm not even just talking about people who don't know about astrology. I'm just saying it's like, here you might find the person who always kind of puts their foot in their mouth or speaks out of turn, something like, but they don't realize they're doing it. It's like you really have to be like, you just did it right there. And they'll be like, oh. So it's really hard to work on that when you don't realize it exists. So something I want to say about the chart in general is, when you look at your chart and you start to see the helpful, easy things, and then you see the challenging things, don't think that that's what you're stuck with. You are not supposed to just say, this is what I am, this is what I have, and so therefore that's my excuse. I know you guys aren't saying that, but you don't look at a chart that way. You don't go, oh, just screwed then, right? For example, if you have children and you start looking at your kids' charts and you go, oh my God, they have this thing. Well, look at it the same way you would as if you took your child to a child psychiatrist when they're 5 years old, and that psychiatrist said, this kid is going to have some issues with self-esteem. What would you do? Would you just go, oh, well, there's your self-esteem issues again, babe? No, you would always be trying to build them up. You would try to show them how to be persistent, show them how to be tenacious, build up their inner confidence, right? That's the same thing you should be doing with your chart. When you see challenging things, you should be going, oh, I have a problem with this. Let me see what I can do to solve that. We're supposed to transcend our charts. In fact, my granddad is 82 years old, and when I look at his chart, I don't really see the problems in his chart anymore. I can ask him about them and he'll be like, oh, yeah, that was a thing when I was younger. But he's worked on it. He's done the work. He's done what he came here to do. So that's the goal. Okay. All right, orbs, very important. And what's an astrological orb? So an orb is the term that we use to describe how exact an aspect is, how strong it is, okay? So if it is You know, if we have two planets that are exactly 180 degrees apart, then we would say it's an exact opposition, or it's an orb of 0 degrees. But if the planets are 184 degrees apart, or 176 degrees apart, did I do my math right? Then we would say that that is an opposition with an orb of 4 degrees. It's still an opposition, it's just not as strong. So the closer to 0, the stronger your aspect is, the more it's going to come out in your personality. With major aspects, we use an orb allowance. I personally use an orb allowance of 6 degrees. So meaning if that aspect is more than 6 degrees apart, I don't consider it. I would say it's too wide or it's out of orb. Conversely, if the planets are very close to an exact degree, an exact aspect, we would say that that aspect, it's a tight aspect, tight orbs. Sometimes you'll hear astrologers say, or you might even hear me say at some point, to tighten down your orbs. What I'm meaning is to turn down the settings, which you can do in astro.com. Don't worry about this right now. If you want to ask me and I'll tell you how. But if you want to turn down your orbs, that's saying just basically shut out anything that's a bigger orb. So you're only looking at the loudest things in the chart. Okay, so the exception to that orb allowance is with the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon are just such big deals that we are going to give them an orb allowance of 10 degrees. Since inconjunctions are minor aspects, all minor aspects, no matter what planet they involve, even if they do involve the sun and the moon, just minor aspects, we do not go over a 2 degree orb. So with the inconjunction, it needs to be 2 or less. When you are looking for aspects, you see the chart. Conjunctions, you're not even going to see them really with a line because they're sitting right next to each other. You can pick up on that, and you can even do the math pretty easily in your head. So on this particular chart that I'm showing you on this slide here, you see that there is the moon in the 3rd house in Virgo, and then you have the sun in the 3rd house in Virgo as well. The moon is at 25 degrees and the sun is at 27 degrees. So look for that there. That's a conjunction. Simple math, 25, 27, that's a 2 degree orb. That's a pretty tight sun-moon conjunction. Inconjunctions are going to show up as green dashed lines. I don't have one on this particular chart, but you might pull your chart and see those. And then the harmonious aspects, the trines and the sextiles, are going to be blue. The challenging aspects, squares and oppositions, are going to be red. And then you can look at your aspect table down here. So if we're trying to not do the math and we just want to know, you can go down here quickly and see. And this is one of the first things I'll do when I analyze a chart, is I'll go down and look for the tightest aspects. So I want you to go ahead and look at this table on this chart that I've pulled up here and tell me what aspect, or I shouldn't say tell me, it's not live. Think about it. See if you can find it. What is the tightest or strongest aspect that jumps out at you the quickest? So what we do is we look at the planet that's running along the top, and then we go down, and then we match it up. So we're coming down and over. So here I see Venus, I see the square symbol, and it has a 0 degree right there, and then it has the symbol for Saturn. So that's Venus square to Saturn at 0 degrees. That's an exact aspect. A lot of times people are going to ask me, what's the plus and minus on there? There's not a plus, excuse me, but there are minus symbols on a lot of these. The minus symbol means it's a little less than that number. So on this one, you see Mercury making a sextile to Mars, and it says -3. That means it's a little less than a 3 degree orb. For this Venus, so the other thing that you'll see is an A, the letter A, or you'll see an S. A means it's applying, meaning that Venus, well, let's not use this particular example. I'll find you an example of an applying one. Let's see. Okay, so we see the moon square to Uranus at 2 degrees, and it has a little A. So that means that the moon is coming towards Uranus. It is applying to it. If it were the other way around, if it had the S, it would mean that the moon is moving away from Uranus, applying versus separating. I don't think at this stage of your interpretation, this is something that you should really get hung up on. I want you to just focus on the number, the orb degree, the orb allowance, and what planets they're between. Another thing that I want to say about orbs, about aspects is, if you are talking about a transgenerational or generational planet, meaning anything from Jupiter out to Pluto, and it's making an aspect to any of the inner planets or the ascendant, or any of the angles, honestly, then the outer planet is affecting the inner one. It's acting on it. So, all right, let's put this together now, for example. So in this case, we have, in this chart, a moon square to Uranus at 2 degrees, pretty tight one, so we'll talk about that one. Uranus is change, right? This is volatility. It is the ups and downs. It's unpredictable. And the moon is a lot about our emotions and our inner core, our gut reactions. But let's think about the word change, and let's think about the word emotion. And now we're going to think, this is a square, so we've got tension here. This is a difficult aspect. So it's not a helpful one, it's a difficult one. So we're gonna term this negatively. So what's happening here? Uranus is negatively affecting the moon. Change, emotions. So the emotions are fluctuating, or we're having a hard time connecting with those emotions. Maybe sometimes we feel them and maybe sometimes we don't feel them, or they're all over the place. Maybe we're moody. So that's a way that you would blend those two planetary energies with the square being the aspect that is challenging. So we'll do another one. We'll talk about Venus and Saturn, because that's a 0 degree square. Again, we've got tension. So Saturn is acting on Venus, and Saturn is restriction, and Venus is love nature. So, and what we value. So do we have an easy time in love? Do we have an easy time valuing ourselves? Not so much. If it's between inner planet to inner planet, so for example, in this chart there is a moon square to Mercury, you're not saying Mercury is acting upon, you're not thinking of it that way. You never say it, but you're not thinking that way. You're just blending those energies. I guess technically it wouldn't be wrong to say that, Mercury is affecting the moon. I just wouldn't do it. It's more so that the outer planet is affecting the inner planet. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Let's do one that's an easy, harmonious aspect. So let's look at this. Venus is trine. There's a triangle, blue triangle, to Pluto at 4 degrees, and it's separating. But we don't worry about the separating. We're just worried about the 4 degrees. So this isn't the tightest aspect, but it absolutely is there. So Pluto is transformation, and Venus are love nature. So this person is able to transform themselves through love, and somebody that is going to be intense, because Pluto is intense in their love nature, but in a good way. Okay, so we'll talk about aspect patterns. Now, here's the thing. I did include this in the curriculum. We are not going to go into this too much because it is very, very complicated, and I don't want to dump too much on you. When I say complicated, I don't think it's complicated to understand what they are. I think it's complicated to start interpreting them, because we have to take everything, every part of that aspect pattern into account. So here, the first one you have is a grand trine. It is literally a trine between 3 different planets or contact placements. So you might have you know, I'm trying to look at what this is. It looks like they've got something between the first house, the fifth house, and the eighth house here in a trine configuration. Trines, because it's a grand trine, it's one big giant triangle, you're going to get the same thing you get with trines, where super pleasant and easy, but there's really no challenge. A lot of times people waste their gifts when they have a grand trine. Not always. That's one of the most frustrating things about astrology. I still have this frustration because I'll talk to Helena, you know, Astro Countess. I'll talk to her and I'll be like, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? And she'll go, well, it depends on the rest of the chart. I'm like, can you just answer this one damn question? She's like, I don't know. I can't see the rest of the chart. Okay. The kite pattern is just like the grand trine, only we are adding into it an opposition in down the middle, and because there's an opposition down the middle, that will create what you're seeing in this kite is you're seeing a grand trine, an opposition down the middle, and two sextiles making up the smaller part. I hope that they're blue lines on here. So that's a lot of ease. That's a lot of nice. But because you have an opposition, you've got just enough tension that this person is usually going to use their gift. They're usually not going to be so lazy with it, with a kite. I far prefer a kite pattern to a grand trine. Okay, and then we have a grand cross, which is going to be between, basically you need planets that are in the same modality. Remember we talked about modalities, cardinal, fixed, mutable. They're going to need to be in the same modality, whereas a grand trine, they're going to be in the same element. A grand cross is going to be in the same modality. And here we have an exceptional amount of attention, a lot, because there's two oppositions and there's 4 squares. So this is going to create a lot of frustration for the person. But again, frustration can create somebody who just pushes themselves. A T-square is just like the grand cross, only it doesn't have that last point, and so therefore there's only one opposition involved in it. It's a little bit like a table with 3 legs. It's still going to create tension, but it's going to be like a little bit more, it's going to be frustrating. Either way, we're like splitting hairs here. They're rough, both of them. Grand cross and T-square are going to create some issues. Lastly is the yod pattern, and people will call this the finger of God. And I don't know why. Maybe they just like that. Was it an isosceles triangle? I don't know. It's created by 2 inconjunctions that are connected on the base by a sextile. So we will do more of this later, but just to kind of recap for you, when you interpret a chart, you're going to pick your starting place. I would recommend the ascendant or the sun. And you're going to walk through each of these things that we've talked about. So first you're going to locate the planet. So let's say we have the sun, and we're going to look, where is the sun? What area of life is being lit up by this native? Where do they want to shine? Where is their will and their drive? And drive is more of a Mars thing, but where is their will, their energy, their core personality? Where's it really gonna shine? Where's it really gonna come out? So that's gonna be the house. So for example, my sun is in my 3rd house. So I'm gonna start that interpretation by saying the sun means all those things I just listed. And the 3rd house means what? Well, predominantly, it's about communication. So where am I really going to want to shine? In how I communicate. This is really a big part of my core personality is communication. Then I'm going to look at the sign. So it's a Scorpio sun. So we have that intensity. We have that investigative nature. We have that passionate nature of the sun in Scorpio, now in the house of communication. So that's where it's really going to come together. We're blending those things. Then we begin to pull in the aspects. What else is the sun contacting? So in my case, it has a conjunction to the moon, and it also has a conjunction to Saturn. And again, varying degrees of how much is that affecting me. So my sun moon conjunction is only, it's 4 degrees. So that's for the sun and moon to be tightly conjunct like that. You're gonna see that in my personality. But the Saturn conjunction is a little over 9 degrees. So it's not going to be quite as strong that Saturn conjunction will come out. So you're going to go through and look at every contact. I would recommend, or every aspect, meaning contact aspect, I would recommend also going and looking at the ruling planet of the ascendant. So whenever you find the sign that the ascendant is in, you're going to figure out what planet is ruling it, and then go see what that planet is doing. Where is it? What house? What sign is it under? What aspects is it making? Because here you've got the ruler, the chart ruler. It's a big deal. So I'm a rising Virgo, and so Mercury is going to be a big deal in my chart. So we want to go find Mercury and see where that focus area is. The other thing is we talked about a little bit about empty houses, and when you have an empty house and you want to understand what's the chart saying about that house, you look at the sign that is on the cusp of that house, and then you say, what's the ruler of that sign? And you go find that planet. That ruling planet is going to be in charge of it. So, example, if you have Aries on the cusp of the 7th house of marriage, the ruling planet is Mars. So you will go find Mars to see what is it doing in the chart. Is it making harmonious aspects, challenging aspects? Is it being limited in some way by Saturn? Is it volatile because it's making difficult contacts to Uranus? You're going to look at that. Okay, so this is aspects and a little bit of synthesization, I don't know. We will meet up on Tuesday at 7:30 Central Standard Time, and we're going to have a big old discussion about all of this, because this is actually a really good point for us to get down to questions that we've had about everything so far before I go into some of the kind of random things like critical degrees and elevated planets and blah, blah, blah. Okay? All right. See you guys soon.